Welcome to the Superfacts Show on the Superfacts Network, featuring St. Laz, who also hosts the popular web series Gem Pop, and music journalist Mark Walter Ward. They have discussions about hip-hop, culture, society, philosophy, and everything else. Now available on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts. What up, world? It's your boy Mark Walter Ward, Superfacts Show, Superfacts Network. Today we have with us MVW, aka Michael Vincent Waller. How you doing today, brother?
How you doing? It's really great to be on the show.
Well, shit, it's great to have you. So this young gentleman came to my attention. He recently, well, first off, he's a classically trained composer who has a list of prestigious accomplishments. It's too long to mention, and not to mention, I don't quite understand the significance of all of them, which we'll get into that in a little while. But he just recently released this outstanding song, Survey Says, which you can find on Dirty Glove Bastard, as well as all digital streaming providers, wherever you get your music, it's everywhere, with Lex Luger and I want to say her name wrong, she did so good, Shanique Marie, who was just outstanding on this song. And in the press release and seriously, everybody go check this out. Survey Says, MVW featuring Lex Luger and Shanique Marie. I guarantee you'll not be disappointed. It's a new kind of sound. It says that you connected with Lex Luger via social media. So how'd that work out?
Yeah, I approached his manager on Insta and just reached out to him and just kind of, because I was doing a remix kind of project. I was working with electronic producers, and I just thought Lex would, kind of fit into that genre kind of blurring category. And I reached out to him, and he did a remix, and that remix eventually became the beat kind of got rearranged and kind of broken down a little bit more into a song structure. But overall, that remix was the core kind of underlying arrangement that we used for Survey Says.
Now, let's stay on that real quick. Did y'all come up with a name for
it? Survey Says?
The beat, that structure you just mentioned, because I think I might got you.
It was just a remix. It was really just called a remix of that original piece. It was
right.
Vibraphone solo.
But brother, how do you know you didn't invent a genre that in that moment? I think you might have invented a genre that we could call, say, trapsicle.
Yeah.
You could be the first trapsicle composer.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
Well, shit. If it ever gets branded, let me get free merch. I'm good on the royalties. That's all you. But So Shanique Marie, she is outstanding on this song. What was your reaction? Obviously it must have been one of pleasure, but were you expecting something that? People throw adjectives around too lightly, but she really delivered on that song, on it.
Yeah, she's really a pleasure to work with, and I heard her first with Equiknoxx, this collective, this like kind of dance hall collective, experimental out of Jamaica, but also very accessible. And she was on the song Manchester, and I just remember her, her bars were just really great, and her delivery was really unique. It was kind of like a hybrid between UK drill and dance hall, and still had a trap accessibility. Yeah, so when I sent it to her, she kind of picked that beat and was really kind of just wrote that hook, and it really kind of turned into the whole core of the song.
Got you. So this project it's a EP.
Yes. And
it's gonna have another song that has Lex Luger on it.
A lot of the productions are gonna be with Lex Luger.
And Ballet got a verse.
Yeah, one of the next song coming out is with Ballet. Yeah, he wrote the hook and a verse, and I kind of arranged that, with the samples that were used by Lex Luger.
Got you. And is there any other rappers of note that are going to be on this project?
For right now, it's just going to be Shanique and Ballet, and there might be a track where they're on together. I'm still, actually finalizing the last piece of the EP, but the singles are kind of coming out right now as I'm finalizing the album. But there should be about 6 songs, and yeah.
Now this is as MVW, but as Michael Vincent Waller, you have, I believe it's 3 albums that have some acclaim, and I was listening to some of your compositions, and like I said, I'm not the hippest to this. I got a new dog in my house, and it's a very aggressive dog, and not aggressive, energetic. And to keep it calm, my wife is taking to playing like greatest of Motown and like Mozart playlists, right? And I was listening to the Mozart like subconsciously, and I started to hear the beauty in it. But I'm 43 now, and if you played me Mozart when I was like 16, and I'm listening to like Run DMC, Public Enemy, and Guns N' Roses, I would have missed the beauty for the lack of excitement. And I started to catch that. And when I was listening to your composition for Papa, that was particularly beautiful to me. So there's really no point to that except kudos. That's an excellent piece of music.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I've been composing for, at least 12, 13 years, and, working on my albums became kind of my obsession over time. And, that was off the last record, Moments. For Papa was the first track. And it was written for my grandfather who passed in 2017. It was very personal and kind of just like kind of improvisatory, the way that the gestures kind of open up. And, I hear like a little bit of, this bluesiness or this kind of, like down tempo kind of sound that's also there, that's in the ambient kind of sounds. And you can hear that nicely with 808 drums and seeing it kind of reemerge. Those kind of sounds is kind of what's exciting me with this new project, and kind of spinning off from my compositions. I'm trying to take the same detail and attention to composition in a different genre and in a different landscape with drums that I'm not composing, because I'm really not a 808 producer. But the way I'm trying to kind of pay attention to the layers and the arrangements and kind of the orchestration of the strings and the samples, and then adding, we added violin on Survey Says with a violinist, Christopher Otto, and just kind of adding those subtle touches in the arranging piece has been really where I've been focusing on the production. So there's the original sample, which inspires the whole composition, and then trying to kind of complete the song, from a songwriting perspective, is kind of how I'm trying to work the material together. And then, like I was saying, in a kind of earlier interview, was that the lyrics become almost like an instrument, and another instrument that
right.
I'm working with in the palette of composition.
No, believe it or not, I totally get you about that part. I kind of got a feeling of how a rap song can come together and the voice can be used as an instrument, where it's placed in a song can make the song have a different effect, or even a total tonal difference, actually. But that's some pretty esoteric shit. But I feel your passion when you're discussing the subject in your press release. It talks about you growing up in Staten Island, listening to all this rap music, which must have been somewhat of a dichotomy, because at this time you must have been practicing well, before we even get into listening to rap music, what skills does one learn as a youngster to become a composer?
I kind of was self-taught on piano, and through my grandma, who also didn't read music, kind of growing up. And then it wasn't until I went to NYU, where I kind of took lessons for a couple of years and tried to study piano and study composition. And then eventually I studied privately with kind of like more underground, like guru style, Lamont Young and Benny Marcus, and studied privately rather than in school. so it was, again, a little bit self-taught and kind of idiomatic with them.
And composing means you're like writing the music that people are performing with various instruments, or you're only writing certain parts, or?
Yeah, all the parts are through composed on sheet music and then performed. And actually all the, the samples that are being used in these tracks are originally on records that I put out and were recorded live, with no click track or anything like that. So they're very like free floating, organic instrumental samples that
did you ever conduct those?
I'm not a conductor, but I'm in the studio recording with the artists and giving them feedback.
But you've had your compositions played at like huge venues too, right?
Some, yeah.
Like historic, like, see, that's the thing. Like, I don't want to be irritating about it, but I don't understand this world. In the press release, it cites like a lot of your accomplishments and lists these. I mean, like, I know like Carnegie Hall and everything, but so like, what are some of the places you've had your music performed at that meant something to you?
A lot of them were kind of community-based institutions. One was Experimental Intermedia, which was Phil Niblock's space. He had this loft in downtown Manhattan that was, and is, was preserved from the 60s, late 60s. And, and there's been thousands of concerts in that space, and performing there and releasing actually my first record there in that space was really kind of very memorable for me. And he was a big inspiration on me as an artist and a minimalist. And, his photographs are actually used as the covers of all three of my albums. So he is always a big mentor to me. And, his space, which is really his home in New York, his loft, very big loft, was, big, an example of kind of the unique spaces that I performed at and really appreciated. The Carnegie Hall was kind of a big part of a big program of Philip Glass, and there was like homages, and there was like assembly of composers that were included on that.
God, bro, you were like a natural for this interview. Like, I haven't had to ask several questions because you've already asked them in the course of the thing you was gonna say. And then back to the Survey Says press release, you made a comment about the post Philip Glass sound. So, yeah. I'm pretty hip to music, and like, don't let the shit behind me fool you. Like I listen to all kinds of different shit. Like, I just ain't real hip to classical music. And I have no idea what does post Philip Glass sound mean?
Well, Philip Glass is kind of like a minimalist composer who's pretty well known.
I do like minimalism
and repetitive melodies, and we hear that influence in everything, right? You hear it in African.
So he like the Neptunes of composing.
I guess so. That would be an interesting way of describing him. Yeah, sure. He has like kind of a style that's very recognizable, like the Neptunes, where you can hear that kind of sound and that repetition. And to me, that's a style of classical music that's continued almost now 40, 50 years, 60 years, if not more. And you don't really hear that part of classical music or contemporary music. Maybe you hear it in film, more in film music, and you hear it, in certain tracks. But trying to focus on that being an inspiration in hip hop, I don't think, where jazz and rock and soul and maybe older classical has been covered pretty well. If you look at even African Bambaataa, he was sampling classical music on records, it's a rich tradition in hip hop. And I'm trying to contribute to it, but kind of also trying to do something different where it's the basis of the melodic, You're
framework. Trying to innovate by standing on the shoulders of what's come before you.
Yeah, definitely.
That's admirable as hell. I ain't gonna ask you the cliche question because I'm sure in these interviews you must have been asked, well, what did it feel like hearing one of your first compositions played by fill in the blank? But I do imagine that moment must have been kind of nerve-wracking. So do you remember the first time you heard one of your compositions being played? that you knew, okay, this is going good?
Yeah. I would say it was probably when I was graduating school, and it was like the undergraduate composers concert, and there was these really seasoned musicians, PhD musicians, organized for the ensemble just for that class concert. And I just remember being a little nervous because it was really like great musicians were going to perform, who have been playing all their lives for like 20-30 years. Yeah, it was pretty exhilarating. And, there was a point in time where I wanted to be in a band and I wanted to be a performer. But I got this thrill from composing and sitting in the audience and kind of, maybe, rehearsing the piece and coaching it along in the process. And that's kind of like the studio process too. You're crafting a song kind of behind the scenes and then kind of, releasing it into the world without actually being really on stage. Doing it.
Got you. So then, let's get to the listening, growing up in Staten Island, listening to hip hop, but not just that. I can tell you have a quite a disparate. I mean, and not just because of the composing, but you said the name of so many genres and subgenres since this podcast has started. So like, tell me about. Influences is too cliche. Here you go. Here's something that ain't no one else going to be talking about or asking you. Given that this is for a straight Southern hip hop audience, or for the most part, what are some songs from non-rap genres that you think Southern hip hop fans would like?
From non-rap
genres. For instance, Pimp C love fucking punk music, British punk music specifically.
Yeah. I was gonna say the first song that came to my mind was "Can I'm So Green," which is like German psych rock. But if you listen to that song, it kind of sounds like you would never guess it's from 1968. It kind of sounds like some late 90s, like kind of funky rock. And I think that would be a good recommendation, for people who like that kind of sound. Or Portishead would be another recommendation for not, hip hop. For people who like hip hop or like the Southern sound of hip hop.
Got you. So now growing up listening to all this rap music in Staten Island, and then being didactic with your composing training or whatever level of musical instruction you had, at what point did you, or was there anything in particular you heard that made you realize you wanted to contribute to the hip hop culture musically at some point?
I think it was only really recently in the pandemic that I was able to fully commit to the idea and kind of say I wanted to do it fully.
Had it been coagulating?
Some beats, and the idea of making hip hop was kind of always faintly in my head for the last couple years, especially lately when I felt accomplished as a composer. I always thought, actually when I first started out trying to be a musician, I was like, maybe I want to be a beat maker. And I was like, okay, but maybe I want to learn music first and really like actually learn how to become a musician and play like in a band or do something like that first. And then I can make beats, right? That was kind of the idea. Let me play music first and then make beats. And then what ended up happening is I just became a composer for like 15 years and got very locked into that. And then, always wanted to go back to that, like kind of 18-year-old, like wanting to be a producer, kind of a hip hop producer. And I never thought I would ever really do it, to be completely honest.
Is that cool? Like in the composing world, are they gonna be like, yo, why you messing with hip hop shit?
I don't know. I'm sure it's not gonna connect with some people, but I'm sure it'll be.
Is it like a snobby old guard and all that type shit? Like what is the composing world like? Like what's the competition like? How do you compete? What determines who's successful? What do you strive for?
I think it's very personal. I think some people want to be recognized by universities and they teach and they get degrees, and that's how they, you know, are able to, you know, make a living doing that. And I never did that. So
well, what do you look for? You seem like you got a clean spirit, brother.
I mean, I look for the ability to be an artist, you know, the ability to be genuine and sincere about like creation and what you hear, what you want to hear, what you want to create. And
God bless you.
Yeah. And I guess that's the freedom that I kind of realized in the pandemic was, you know, all my concerts were canceled at like everybody's story. You know, I was going to be doing something that was kind of different for classical. I was going to be doing, you know, South by Southwest. And it was going to be touring kind of, I was gearing up, and that kind of dissipated very quickly with everything else. And, you know, obviously selfishly, I was like, oh, wow, you know, this was a big kind of pivot point for me. And then I just spent a little more time thinking about the remix project, and then slowly started working and just looking out more hip hop producers to collaborate with and work with the classical kind of sound and try to push them together. And, you know, at first some samples, like, you know, some of the, you know, productions I was doing, you know, there would be shorter samples and you really couldn't feel the classical influence as much, or the sound in the sample. They were like a little chopped up too, or, you know, kind of too restricted rhythmically. But then, you know, some of this, you know, like I said, with these productions with Lex Luger, the samples are really flowing and you know, really breathe organically, true to the music and to the melodies. And that's really where I think the harmony is in the totally different approaches to making, you know, a production.
Damn, that's profound. So when's the next song coming out?
May 14th. Yeah, it's not really announced outside of press. So this is, you know, whenever this airs will be maybe potentially, because it, you know, otherwise it'll just drop on May 14th. Yeah, it's called Still Do. And yeah, Valet.
Got you. And like I said, MVW got Survey Says out right now. This is just incredible. It's definitely a fresh new sound, co-produced with Lex Luger. Shanique Marie absolutely does a thing. Is there anything I should have asked you about, or interesting stories I'm missing out on?
You know, I have a question for you. I was just curious, like, you know, you said that, you know, you came in, you know, to when you were 42, you're now appreciating classical music, and, you know, it's kind of part of your relaxation listening. Do you think it has a room in the hip hop culture to kind of be like a thing, or like a kind of like a little bit of a wave of a beat sound, or just a kind of a movement, or does it just need to be like this one kind of experiment, or you know, hey, I checked out that album, that's like a cool, you know, I'm just curious, where do you think the latitude is for it? Is it a novelty thing, or is it to you?
Not at all. Because I mean, if somebody wasn't familiar with classical music, they're probably not even gonna realize that element of the song if it's still quality. I mean, if this becomes something that catches on, obviously there's going to be the typical spectrum of what's good and what's not. But yeah, I mean, like, one thing I feel about rap in general, hip hop, is that I wish there was more keyboard. You know, I wish there was more scratching. You know, those are elements of composing right there. You know, song arrangement. You know, it definitely, I mean, maybe not as a branded movement as such, but like, it's definitely not no auto-tune type shit. Like, it's something that not only has potential, I feel will naturally happen. Because I mean, it's cliche when I say good musicians like good music, but if you're providing good music for good musicians to work with, then why wouldn't the outcome be good music, especially if it's approachable?
Yeah.
You know, like at the end of the day, it's still like, see, I don't know a lot about, I definitely don't know shit about musical theory, but, you know, that James Brown shit about keeping it on the one or whatever, like, at the end of the day, it's all the same rhythms, right?
Yeah.
And rappers can definitely get on rhythms, and drummers can definitely get on the rhythms of composers. So why wouldn't the potential be unlimited?
Yeah. Do that.
Shit. So, well, hey, I'm flattered. Before we get out of here, what's your socials and anything else you want to shout out?
Yeah, you can follow me at Michael V Waller on Instagram. Yeah, just be lookout for MVW on Spotify and Apple and any other streaming venues. The new track with Valet Still Do will be coming out May 14th. I'm excited about that one.
Man, me too, brother. Thank you for your time, and thank you for giving me a little bit of culture and education.
Pleasure. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
No doubt, man. You have a good night.
Okay, bye.
All right, take it light.
The Superfacts Network, home of Jump Pop, STE, and the Superfacts Show, now available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts from. Come check out St. Laz, G from the Shop, and Mark Walter Award.